I wonder if you could comment. I have some thoughts about this issue of the evangelicals in the United States, but I wonder if you could comment from your point of view how that trajectory has developed and is developing in the future.
Well, Jeff, first I have a question though about what you said, and it's a great, you posed it in a perfect way. But I'm curious if Israel does become politicized fully in the manner in which you described, and it's the Republican Party that is its protector in the United States, and it loses the Democratic Party, what do you think that would mean for Israel? Wouldn't that be I should think that would be extremely worrying to Israel.
I think it is, but they have to make some choices in terms of their allies and what's available and what's not available. And as liberal opinion becomes more skeptical, they're relying more and more on the sort of fortress right wing, not just in the United States, but around the world also. And I guess I would say, whatever the sort of liberal pretensions of Zionism was earlier, of course, they were self-described socialists that were, some of the founders of Israel. The logic of an ethnic exclusive colonial state, which is, indisputably what Israel is,
yes,
is not liberal.
No.
It's becoming clear to Israeli politicians that at least the right wing, which is very dominant in Israel, that in this age, to be a racialized, ethnic state, implies that you have to have different kinds of allies than the ones you had when you were supposedly building a kibbutz utopia in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And it was predictable if anyone really thought about it. Not most of us did not, but it's logical that was the development.
Yes.
You can't be a liberal colonialist.
No, and on those kibbutzes, they didn't allow Palestinians,
yeah.
right there, including in places where, they were on Palestinian land, so a lot of this was baked in or it was in the DNA or the seeds of this.
Yeah, without a doubt. And of course, back, before the creation of the State of Israel, people could be more explicit about it. It was common to use the terminology of colonialism in creating the pre-state Israel and the sort of Zionist integration. No one thought that was, that's become a little bit sort of disfavored and, in the current environment, but people were very explicit about it, that this was a colonial enterprise. I mean, the Jewish National Fund, the predecessor of it was the Jewish Colonial Fund. And Herzl talked about that and so on. So essentially the chickens are coming home to roost in this colonial enterprise, and they're looking for the logical allies for that. And it's not progressive and liberal thought, even though there's a kind of hangover, right, of support and fondness for Israel that is constantly being undermined by the reality of it.
Yes.
It's becoming harder and harder to support.
Although I'd say that, to answer your question about the time frame, and you would have some insight into this as much as I think I do, but certainly there was an anachronistic element to Zionism, certainly in the 40s, 50s. We were supposed to be decolonizing the world, and here you were creating a colonial entity of some sort. And one of the amazing, interesting things about American political history is that again and again, Black radicals raised this question in the American discourse. And so the SNCC brain trust in the 60s was raising this issue. And I think that, I don't have the facts right at hand, but Michael Fishbach goes into this in his book about the issue, a recent book, where, SNCC would say, what about the Palestine question? These people are as oppressed as we are, and they lost their funding. They had big Jewish funders who were very radical. They had radical Jewish friends, left-wing Jewish friends, who were left-wing up to this point, but they weren't questioning Zionism. I bring this up more to go to the timeline, which is that again and again, when the issue has been raised in the Democratic Party, it has been successfully repressed. And so I think that for all of us, one of the miracles of the last year is that this business, that this urgent question of oppression of based on race, Zionism is racism, the famous UN General Assembly a resolution of 1975. This has been an urgent question on the left, but it's always been pushed down by elites and by the party leadership in the Democratic Party, and indeed by broad sections of the Democratic Party, which could not tolerate this discourse. And the miracle is that it's finally coming in. So your question to me is, why is it that this issue has never been politicized in any real way in America? America gives all this money and will never question its support for Israel. All presidents stand by Israel, our best friend, as Biden put it. Why is it suddenly becoming politicized? And I guess, everyone on this call, I think, and hopefully we'll be getting some of the participants, other participants will be unmuted before too long, but will have their own theory about what has happened. But the two things I would point to are, one, Black Lives Matter, and the revolution that we are seeing in American political culture, maybe brought on by Trump, but where the progressive voices are really at the center of the democratic discourse. And that includes Black Lives Matter, and is a very urgent matter. And you cannot square the oppression of Palestinians under apartheid with supporting Black Lives Matter. It's impossible to reconcile. And so even politicians, I think, like Chuck Schumer, who's up for re-election next year, is afraid of getting primaried by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or some other progressive young person. And he's being careful on this issue because this issue could really bite him. The other factor I would point to, and maybe this is, I know that I could be accused of some narcissism here, but hey, it's my point of view, is that the Jewish community has grown and matured, and that there has been an active anti-Zionist discussion inside the American Jewish community. And I feel that has, and here I even credit J Street, an organization I don't really like, but J Street has helped to politicize the question, has said there's more diversity in the Jewish community than just lockstep with Israel. And you have really important anti-Zionist group, Jewish Voice for Peace. You have a non-Zionist but renegade young Jewish group, If Not Now, which is challenging the leadership. So I think that signal that the Jewish community is beginning to fracture is allowing other people to open their mouths. So those are the two factors I'd point to.
I definitely agree. And just in response to sort of your general wondering, why didn't this view take root sooner, about Israel and its colonial nature? I mean, really, you explained a lot of it at the very beginning, that, the question of anti-Semitism in Europe and the United States, the Holocaust, the tremendous guilt that at least liberal-minded people felt about, allowing that to happen or failing to stop it, gave a kind of Jewish exceptionalism to their colonial enterprise. In other words, it's absolutely true what Tony Judt and others have said was, starting a colonial enterprise after the Second World War, when decolonization was the main trend in the world, it was obsolete. Well, it was given a kind of exceptional pass because of the guilty conscience of a lot of the world about treating the Jews. And, frankly, people looked at the Jews as anti-Semitism was weakening, this sort of personal anti-Semitism, looked at the Jewish founders of Israel, and they were people who looked like us, and the Arabs were this other that, we still in the colonial mindset didn't count very much, so Ben-Gurion and the early founders of Israel could tour the United States and hey, we're Europeans, we're civilized, and we're fighting for a country among these uncivilized Muslim Arabs. And, that carried a lot of weight, particularly with that guilt of the experience of the Jews. And it's taken a generation or two for that exceptionalism to wear off and for people to take the blinders off and see this colonial enterprise for what it is. In the same way people had no trouble understanding what South African apartheid was about. But it took a longer time, including for people like me, to really understand and grapple with the nature of Israel. So
Yes.
I hope that wasn't too elaborate.
No, I think you're right. And one anecdote I just like to relate is when I started this site, I remember walking around Columbia University campus in '06 with a Palestinian friend. And it was late at night, we'd had something to drink, and he suddenly ran out into Broadway and said, he just raised his hand, my goal in life is to end Zionism. And I was like, oh, I was shocked by that. And later I said to this guy, his name was Saif, I said, Saif, hey, can I quote you on my blog? I found that electrifying what you said. I don't know what to think about it, but I found it shocking and electrifying. And he said, no. You can, that will destroy. So just that the degree of secrecy and fear and anxiety around that statement, a very simple declaration of what I think are good principles, it was shocking to me then. And now I think it's almost a commonplace that you'll hear people on. Certainly, my own publisher has said, just tweeted recently when someone was talking about my goal is to, protect Israel from ever. He tweeted, my goal is to end Zionism.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a worthy goal in the Jewish community. And I have many friends who share it, and they're not, there's the apprehension and anxiety and fear and excitement and shock that accompanied that statement 15 years ago, for me, and I think for many others, is no longer there. And that's a great thing.
Yeah. And the real question is, what took so long?
Right.
For a lot of us.
Well, we have something to
I'm not
answer
including
for.
myself either.
Yeah, Jeff, you and me, we have to, a little self-flagellation comes in. We deserve it.